Colin, you can start.
Thank you, Siva, and welcome everybody. Very happy to welcome you here tonight to our interfaith meeting. I haven't got the number in front of me, but it's been going for 3.5 years every Thursday, and we have a great range of links and talks and topics, past talks collected on a website, and we're looking forward to adding a talk tonight by Violetta Zane, who I will introduce properly a little bit later, who will be talking about the life of the Bab. As you may have seen on the notice, if you could keep yourself muted when you're not talking, and when it comes time for questions and conversation, if you could use the reactions button to put your hand up, that creates a nice orderly queue. I wonder, Siva, have you organised someone to acknowledge country?
I will do that. Welcome to you all. Here in Australia, it's a traditional practice to honor the indigenous people in the land. And in that regard, I found this particular passage from the Universal House of Justice, the supreme administrative body of the Baha'i faith, sent on as a response message 2023, relevant. It says there is a widespread acknowledgement that the present day structures of society are ill-prepared to address the needs of humanity in its current travails. Much that was widely assumed to be certain and unshakable is being questioned, and the resulting ferment is producing a longing for a unifying vision. The chorus of voices raised in support of oneness, equality, and justice shows how many share these aspirations for their societies. Now, in Australia, the indigenous people have been living for more than 60,000 years. They have their own spirituality, culture, law, traditions, and customs and languages. And they have a lot of spiritual wisdom. But since the arrival of the migrants, their life has been changed in a way that we are deprived of their knowledge and wisdom. While we enjoy their land and that they have been protecting for so long, but they are marginalized in many ways. Yet they show resilience, patience, tolerance, love, and kindness, allowing us to live here, and we pay our gratitude, and also we acknowledge and pay respect to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and the elders of this nation. In the continuation of cultural, spiritual, and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, we acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander tribes were the first sovereign nations of the Australian continent, and they claim that their sovereignty is a spiritual of nature. The Gadigal of Eora Nation are the traditional custodians of this place we now call Sydney, and Wangal people are traditional owners of Burwood, where my wife and I live. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you very much, Siva. And now we'll begin the devotional program with some music and then readings and another music.
अथ षोडशोऽध्यायः। श्रीभगवानुवाच अभयं सत्त्वसंशुद्धिः ज्ञानयोगव्यवस्थितिः दानं दमश्च यज्ञश्च स्वाध्यायस्तप आर्जवम् अहिंसा सत्यमक्रोधः त्यागः शान्तिरपैशुनम् दया भूतेष्वलोलुप्त्वम् मार्दवम् ह्रीरचापलम् तेजक्षमा धृतिः शौचम् अद्रोहो नातिमानिता भवन्ति सम्पदम् दैवीम् अभिजातस्य भारत।
I pray, let your anger and your fury be turned away from your city, Jerusalem, your holy mountain, because for our sins and for the iniquities of our fathers, Jerusalem and your people are a reproach to all those around us now. Therefore, our God, hear the prayer of your servant and his supplications, and for the Lord's sake, cause your face to shine on your sanctuary, which is desolate. Oh my God, incline your ear and hear. Open your eyes and see our desolations, and the city which is called by your name, and the city which is called by your name. For we do not present our supplications before you because of our righteous deeds, but because of your great mercies. Oh Lord, hear. Oh Lord, forgive. Oh Lord, listen and act. Do not delay, for your own sake, my God, for your city and your people are called by your name. Oh Lord, hear. Oh Lord, forgive. Oh Lord, listen and act. Oh Lord, hear.
Let's pray. Readings from the Baha'i Scriptures. O Lord, thou possessor of infinite mercy, O Lord of forgiveness and pardon, forgive our sins, pardon our shortcomings, and cause us to turn to the kingdom of clemency, invoking the kingdom of might and power, humble at thy shrine and submissive before the glory of thine evidence. O Lord God, make us as waves of the sea, as flowers of the garden, united, agreed through the bounties of thy love. O Lord, dilate the breast through the signs of thy wonders, and make all mankind as stars, shining from the same height and glory, as perfect fruits growing up upon thy tree of life. Verily, thou art the mighty, the self-subsisting, the giver, the forgiver, the pardoner, the omniscient, the one creator. Baha'i Scriptures.
Of the sin against God, thou art atonement. Of the sin against mankind, thou art atonement. For sin against the fathers, thou atonest. Of the sin against oneself, thou art atonement. Of every sort of sin, thou art atonement. The sin that I have knowingly committed, and that unawares I have committed, of all that wickedness thou art atonement. O endowed transcendent one, I myself and others request that you cleanse wrongs and hindrances from all sentient beings and purify every weakened and broken sacred word of honour.
O Son of Man, the true lover yearneth for tribulation, even as doth the rebel for forgiveness, and the sinful for mercy. O Son of Man, breathe not the sins of others, so long as thou art thyself a sinner. Shouldst thou transgress this command, accursed wouldst thou be, and to this I bear witness. O oppressors on earth, withdraw your hands from tyranny, for I have pledged myself not to forgive any man's injustice. This is my covenant, which I have irrevocably decreed in the preserved tablet and sealed with my seal. Baha'i Scriptures.
A religious student who retains what he has learned, who finds pleasure in the fulfillment of the law, who keeps the rules of studentship, who is upright and forgiving, attains perfection. The one who strikes others is not a hermit. One is not an ascetic who insults others. not to blame, not to strike, to live restrained under the law, to be moderate in eating, to live alone, and to practice the highest consciousness. This is the teaching of the awakened one. Let us live in joy, not hating those who hate us. Among those who hate us, we live free of hate. Let us live in joy, free from greed among the greedy. Among those who are greedy, we live free of greed. Let us live in joy. Though we possess nothing, let us live feeding on joy like the bright gods. Buddhist scriptures.
If we say that we have no sins, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Christianity, if thou, Lord, shouldest mark iniquities, O Lord, who shall stand? But there is forgiveness with thee, that you mayest be fair. I wait for the Lord, my soul doth wait, and in his word do I hope. Judaism.
Allah beckons by his grace to the garden of bliss and forgiveness, and makes his signs clear to mankind, that they may celebrate his praise. The believers are nothing else than brothers in Islam. So make reconciliation between your brothers and fear Allah, that you may receive mercy. O mankind, we created you from male and female, and made you into nations and tribes, that ye may know each other, not that ye may despise each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of Allah is he who is the most righteous of you, and Allah has full knowledge and is fully informed. The Quran.
It is also recorded in the Gospel, according to St. Luke, that on a certain day, Jesus passed by a Jew who was sick of the palsy and lay upon a couch. When the Jew saw him, he recognized him and cried out for his help. Jesus said unto him, Arise from thy bed, thy sins are forgiven thee. Certain of the Jews standing by protested, saying, Who can forgive sins but God alone? And immediately he perceived their thoughts. Jesus answering said to them, Whether is it easier to say to the sick of the palsy, Arise and take up thy bed and walk, or to say, Thy sins are forgiven thee, that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins? This is the real sovereignty, and such is the power of God's chosen ones. All these things which we have repeatedly mentioned, and the details which we have cited from diverse sources, have no other purpose but to enable thee to grasp the meaning of the allusions and the utterances of the chosen ones of God, lest certain of these utterances cause thy feet to falter and thy heart to be dismayed. Baha'i Scripture.
O, O children of men, if ye believe in the one true God, follow me, this most great remembrance of God, sent forth by your Lord, that he may graciously forgive you your sins. Verily, he is forgiving and compassionate toward the concourse of the faithful. We offer truth, choose the messengers through the potency of our word, and we exalt their offspring, some over others, through the great remembrance of God as decreed in the book and concealed therein, Baha'i scriptures.
God has crowned you with honor, and in your hearts as he set a radiant star. Verily the light thereof shall brighten the whole world.
Be generous in prosperity and thankful in adversity. Be worthy of the trust of thy neighbor, and look upon him with a bright and friendly face.
God has crowned you with honor, and in your hearts as he set a radiant star. Verily the light thereof shall brighten the whole world.
Be a treasure to the poor, an admonisher to the rich, an answer to the cry of the needy, a preserver of the sanctity of thy pledge.
God has crowned you with honor, and in your hearts as he set a radiant star. Verily the light thereof shall brighten the whole world.
Be fair in thy judgment and guarded in thy speech. Be unjust to no man, and to all meekness to all men.
God has crowned you with honor, and in your hearts as he set a radiant star. Verily the light thereof shall brighten the whole world.
Thank you very much, Siva, for the choice of readings and the music. I love that last song in particular, and thank you all to the readers.
Beautiful.
And very overjoyed to welcome our speaker tonight, who doesn't know it yet, but she's about to find out that she's related to myself and my wife Yung, who's in the meeting, through the Zanes in our community. So, but what's more interest to everybody is that
Pretty good.
yeah.
No, that's interesting.
Okay. So Violetta is an artist and graphic designer living in Pointe-Noire in Congo, and is a researcher, writer, and presenter in the field of Baha'i history. She is the co-creator with Adib Masumian of the Utterance Project. a website and YouTube channel dedicated to sharing the beauty of the utterances of the Bab, Baha'u'llah, and Abdu'l-Baha in the original Arabic and Persian. She is the author of 4 illustrated chronologies on the lives of the central figures: The Primal Point, The Blessed Beauty, The Extraordinary Life of Abdu'l-Baha, and The Guardian. These 4 chronologies total 2,000 pages and 4,000 illustrations and are available in their entirety on the Utterance Project website. And Violetta is a regular speaker on the Clearwater Baha'is YouTube channel, where she has given over 50 talks on Baha'i history since 2022. I've listened to one of them, part of the life of the Guardian, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm waiting to retire so I can listen to the rest of them. So Violetta, tonight I believe you're talking on the life of the Bab, and over to you. I'm looking forward to it.
I apologize. I had an urgent phone call from the counselor. Thank you so much for that introduction. I want to just give you an idea of what we're going to do today. It's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to talk about the Bab's life in summary form. And once in a while, I'm going to break the story of the events of his life in chronological order, and I'm going to tell a story. And my purpose in this is that we thanked the Aboriginal people at the beginning of this, the Torres Strait Islanders and the Aboriginal people of Australia. And they, like all Indigenous cultures of the world, have a storytelling tradition that binds their hearts together in shared culture. And we also do as Baha'is. In 1915, during the First World War, when the Baha'is returned from their refuge in the Druze village of Abu Sinan, Abdu'l-Baha organized storytelling evenings on Saturdays, and he told the stories of 85 early believers. And we now know this book as the Memorials of the Faithful. And so storytelling binds us to our history. And that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to get through the entire life of the Bab with storytelling in interludes between putting the Bab's life in context. So I'm going to start, and I will when I sort of tell the story in summary form, I won't share my screen. But then when I'm actually telling a story, I will. There is an option here that I don't have. Okay, doesn't matter. So we're going to start with the birth of the Bab on the 20th of October, 1819. The picture you see here is the room where the Bab was born. There's a tapestry over the side of the wall. This is the home of his father, Sayyid Muhammad Reza. And he was born when Baha'u'llah was 2 years old. They have 2 years difference. The Bab was belonged to a family that was very widely known in Shiraz and in Persia as a noble family of deeply pure lineage. The Bab, through both his father and his mother, is directly related to the Prophet Muhammad through his grandson, the Imam Hussein, the son of his daughter, Fatima. The Bab's parents, Sayyid Muhammad Reza, was a wholesale merchant, and he dealt in cloth. He and his wife, Fatima Begum, had lost several children in infancy, just like the parents of Baha'u'llah, who lost 2 boys before Abdu'l-Baha was born. And the Bab was their first and only child to survive infancy. The house of the Bab in childhood was between the houses of 2 of Fatima Begum's brothers, the Bab's maternal uncles. Now, the maternal uncles of the Bab play a gigantic role in his life. He had 3 maternal uncles, all the brothers of his mother, so on his mother's side. And the Bab was born in the upper chamber of his father's home in a room in the northwest corner of the building. The first few years of his life were a joy for his doting mother. The Bab was an amazing, 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 amazing baby. He was absolutely perfect. He never cried. He only fed a few times a day. He didn't cry when he was weaned off breast milk and started eating solid food. And his mother, you know, she had a lot of anxiety because she'd lost babies before. So she was so worried. She was so anxious that her baby was calm. And then she started thinking about it and she realized there's nothing wrong with him. If he was sick, he would cry. So she just accepted this bounty that she had of having basically a perfect baby. From the moment he was 5, from the moment he was born, the Bab was exceptional. He had innate knowledge. When he was a child, he could predict earthquakes. He could accurately predict the sex of any child a woman was pregnant with. He knew things that were impossible to know. From the age of 5, he was immersed in prayer in the middle of the night with tears streaming down his face in adoration of God. I want to just pause here and tell you that the Bab knew he was a manifestation of God from birth. His connection to his grandfather, which is what all direct descendants of Muhammad call the Prophet Muhammad, was so intense. His faith was so intense. When they went on outings with the school, the Bab would go into a corner and pray. When they went hiking with his uncles, the Bab would go down the mountain and pray in the middle of the night. He prayed constantly. When he started entering school, his professor, who was a believer in the teachings of Sheikh Ahmad and Sayyid Kazim, realized the Bab already knew how to read and write Persian and Arabic at the age of 5. And he kept papers the Bab wrote. The Bab attended his school for 5 years between the ages of 5 and 10. And Sheikh Abid, his professor, kept essays that the Bab had written between the ages of 5 and 10. And 2 Babis came to see him after the Bab's martyrdom, and they asked, can we see those papers? And they realized that the voice in which the Bab was speaking in those papers he'd written between the ages of 5 and 10 were basically the exact same tone of voice from the Qayyum al-Asma and the Bab's writings after his declaration. Now, what's kind of interesting is that for many, many years, for decades, for centuries in the Baha'i faith, we've always said the Bab's father died when he was 5, when he was 4, when he was 3, when he was 2, when he was a baby. The Bab's father died when he was 12, when he was 10. And actually, none of that is true. We actually know, and we have known since 2005, when Dr. Abbas Amanat wrote his amazing dissertation, Resurrection and Renewal. Since then, we've known that the Bab's father passed away in 1826 when the Bab was 7 years old. This is really interesting because it correlates with the research of Dr. Nader Saidi, who wrote an amazing book that everyone should own called Gate of the Heart, Understanding the Writings of the Bab. And I will talk about that in the next slide. But I want to talk about the Bab's father passing away. Several things are going to happen after the Bab passes away. The Bab's mother and her only son, she becomes a single mother, really, in modern parlance. Because at the time she wouldn't have been able to have any revenue, she's taken in with her son by her middle brother, Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, who is going to be the tutor and the guardian of the Bab until he becomes an adult at the age of 15, which is the age in Islam, because he was a Muslim, of course. He was a Shia Muslim as a child and a youth, and until 1944. The Bab's father was not a very successful merchant, but he did manage to save money and leave something for his wife and child. He died, according to Dr. Amanat, in an epidemic of cholera that ravaged the province that Shiraz was in. So I want to talk here about something very fascinating. In the Dawnbreakers, there is a man who repeatedly appears in the story, told by Nabil and translated brilliantly by Shoghi Effendi, recreated, in fact, by Shoghi Effendi as the Dawnbreakers. In the original, the Dawnbreakers had absolutely no chapters. There was no break between the lines. The Guardian recreated the whole thing, added an index, illustrations. I mean, it's just a completely new creation. There is a man who comes up again and again in the story who is referred to solely as the Ethiopian servant. A member of the Bab's extended family, and Afnan wrote a book called Black Pearls, and he said this man's name was Mubarak, and he was a domestic slave. In Baha'i parlance, we refer to him as a servant, for the simple reason that although he really was a slave, he'd been purchased, and he'd been taken from Ethiopia when he was 5. Domestic servants in Islam and in Muslim countries in the 19th century and Persia in particular, if they had intellectual capacity and spiritual capacity and moral rectitude, they could rise to become governors of provinces. And Mubarak was just such a person. He was an incredible person. He was very, very, very intelligent. He was gifted in commerce. He was gifted in accounting. He entered the Bab's life after his father died when the Bab was 7, and he taught the Bab courtesy, etiquette, and manners, perfect manners, as befitting of his very famous family and very well-renowned family. And Mubarak helped raise the Bab from the age of 7. And so the Bab knew Mubarak from his entire childhood, all the way up to the moment that he's going to leave Shiraz in 1846. Mubarak was about 15 years older than the Bab. And in a book called the Kitab Si Dua, the Book of 30 Prayers, which was the name of this was given by Dr. Saidi, is a book that the Bab revealed the year before he was martyred, and it contains 30 prayers, one for each year of his life. And in prayer number 7, for the age of 7 years old, the Bab speaks of Haji Mubarak and sends down to his African servant blessings for having taken care of him. And he calls Mubarak, he who raised me. So the prophet herald of the Baha'i faith, the precursor of Baha'u'llah, the founder of an entire religious dispensation, considered a black man to be a father figure to him. And later on in the same book, the Bab praises Mubarak and begs God to send down blessings for him, because after the death of his father, when he was 7 years old, Mubarak made a bow and arrow for him. And that's kind of an amazing event, because the child has just been orphaned. Yet this servant, who is a father figure to this boy, 15 years older than him, thinks of doing something for the Bab's amusement, thinks of making him a bow and arrow. Don't worry, Haji Mubarak will come back into the story. After he leaves school, the Bab goes and works in his family's offices. And between the ages of 10 and 15, he's no longer in school, and he's sort of learning the business. Then, when he turns 15, the Bab goes to a city called Bushir. And I want to show you a couple of things here. I'm going to share my screen for just a couple of things. Shiraz is here, and directly southwest is Bushir. And as you see, Bushir is a port city. It's on the Persian Gulf. And this black area, that's darker area here, is Iraq. So the Bab moves to Bushir, and for 6 years, he works in the import-export business of his family. This is a tea plantation in India in the early 20th century. And this is one of the things that the Bab imported. So in his dissertation, Resurrection and Renewal, Dr. Amanat goes into great detail about the commerce of the Bab. And I think this is very fascinating. So I'm going to share it with you. The Afnan family had a large-scale trade inside Persia, from Shiraz to Bushir and a city called Bandar Abbas in the north. The family traded internationally, and that's why they had offices in the port city of Bushir, because they expected shipments by steamers. They exported to and from Muscat in Bahrain in the Persian Gulf, Ishkabad in Turkmenistan, which is landlocked, Beirut, Lebanon, Zanzibar in East Africa, Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras in India, and Hong Kong and Java in Southeast Asia. And one of the members of the family even moved to India to facilitate their trade with them. So what did they export and import? They exported carpets. To India, they exported carpets, dried rose petal, rose water, foodstuffs, and dried fruit, such as shelled almonds and raisins, and at times gold coins. And what did they import? So they imported from all these different places sugar, tea, coffee, grains, seeds, spices, indigo, and other vegetable dyes, natural gums, various kinds of calico to make curtains, women's clothing, tablecloths, English wool and cotton from England, raw silk, carpets, tin, and other semi-processed metals, and sometimes livestock from India. The Bab was so pure in his in everything that he did. You know, he didn't smoke. He had just an extremely pure life. He refused to trade certain goods. So, for example, the Bab never bought or sold weapons, alcohol, or opium, but he refrained from dealing in stinky merchandise. So, for example, asafoetida, a very famous gum made from a variety of giant fennel in India. And he also did not import smelly sheepskin. So the Bab spent 5 years in Bushir, and from 1835 to 1841. 1841 is 3 years before the declaration of the Bab. So just like Baha'u'llah felt in Baghdad as the years were approaching, the 22nd of April, 1863, when he made his declaration in Garden of Rizwan, the Bab was suffused and transported and feeling these incredible transports of ecstasy and delight and closeness to God and Baha'u'llah and Muhammad. And he would pray in Bushir, turning his face to Tehran where Baha'u'llah was. And so there is something stirring in the Bab at the approach of the year of his revelation. And what he decides to do is to leave Bushir. He closes the family accounts. He settles all the accounts. He puts a seal on the door, and he leaves for something that is called the Atabat. So the Atabat, I need to show this to you, is kind of, oh, hold on. There you go. And there you go. So the Atabat is a Shia pilgrimage. Sunni Muslims do not make the Atabat. Only Shia Muslims do, because Shia Muslims are sort of like the Catholics of Islam. They love their imams like the Catholics love their saints. They have holy places where the imams lived, were born, or buried. Sunni Muslims are sort of like Protestants. They don't have this attachment to imams that the Shia do. And the Shia have a pilgrimage called the Atabat, where they go and they visit the holy places where 6 of the imams are buried in Iraq: Samarra, Kazimain, Karbala, and Najaf. The Bab is going to spend 11 months in Iraq performing the Atabat. We don't know exactly where he went. We know for a fact he spent 8 months in Karbala. And in Karbala, he's going to meet Sayyid Kazim. And Sayyid Kazim is just, I mean, it's an incredible moment. Sayyid Kazim is the disciple of Sheikh Ahmad, and he took over in 1926 when Sheikh Ahmad passed away in Saudi Arabia. And he has been preparing for the Bab's arrival for decades. When the Bab arrives in Karbala, Sayyid Kazim just instinctively knows who has arrived. It's really difficult to understand the station of Sheikh Ahmad and Sayyid Kazim because everything they said was the truth, and they're not prophets. They never were, they never will be. They're not manifestations of God, but they were divinely inspired and kind of, I mean, infallible. I mean, they knew down to the physical characteristics of the Bab what he would look like. They knew he was a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. They knew he didn't smoke. How could they possibly know that if they weren't inspired by God? So at daybreak, Sayyid Kazim and one of his students walk through the dark streets of Karbala as the sun is rising and the light day is coming. And they arrive at a house and they see this extraordinary looking, handsome Sayyid with a green turban, with this absolutely unbelievable expression on his face of kindness, of generosity. The only word that is spoken during this meeting, where Sayyid Kazim knows exactly who the Bab is. He knows he is the one whose advent he's been proclaiming for decades. And the only thing that the Bab says to Sayyid Kazim after he fills a silver cup to overflowing and hands it to Sayyid Kazim, and the man who's with Sayyid Kazim thinks, oh my God, the smell of that beverage, the room that they're in is filled with flowers. That beverage smells heavenly, like something I've never smelled before. And the Bab hands this silver cup, which is absolutely prohibited in Islam. No Muslim can drink from a pure silver cup for some reason. And he tells him, a drink of pure beverage shall their Lord give them. And after this, Sayyid Kazim leaves, the Bab leaves. And then 3 days later, the Bab sees Sayyid Kazim again in one of his lectures. And Sayyid Kazim says that the promised one is as obvious as a ray of sunlight in his lap. And he points to the Bab where a ray of sunlight has just landed, and none of the students get it. That's what we in Baha'i mysticism and Baha'i parlance, we call that a veil in front of their eyes. You know, like in the prayer for husbands, oh my Lord, remove the veil from before his sight. It's the same sort of thing. They all had this veil, but I'm going to just go ahead and say that it was a really thick curtain because the ray of sunlight was on the Bab's lap. Sayyid Kazim pointed to the ray of sunlight and no one got it. Now, one interesting thing that Dr. Amanat says in his PhD thesis, Resurrection and Renewal, is that the Bab actually met briefly Mullah Hussein before the night of the declaration in Karbala, because they were in Karbala in Iraq at the same time. Apparently, the Bab attended a gathering, and in that gathering, Sayyid Kazim had asked Mullah Hussein to recite poems. And the way that Mullah Hussein had recited the poems was so absolutely incredible that his tears flowed down his face. They never spoke, but they were in the same room and the Bab saw him. It's unclear if Mullah Hussein saw him as well. So I have a very exciting, story for you now. Oh, I'm going to tell you two stories actually. So what you see here is kind of not a well-known picture of a courtyard in the Bab's house. There were two courtyards in the house. This is the courtyard where Mubarak now lives. In 1842, the Bab returns to Shiraz, basically brought back, not by force, but by loving encouragement by his uncle, whom his mother has sent because she adores her only son. She's a doting mother and she has not laid eyes on her son for 6 years. So imagine the state Fatima Begum is in. She begs her brother, go to Shiraz, bring him back. So his uncle goes and brings him back with the help of Sayyid Kazim. And when he returns, the Bab starts talking to his mother and to everybody about how he's going to go back to Iraq and do the Atabat. That was so wonderful. I'm going to do that again. And Fatima Begum just really becomes very anxious. She does not, absolutely does not want the Bab to leave Shiraz again. So what she does is she arranges a marriage with an absolutely extraordinary young woman that the Bab grew up with, who's a distant cousin of his, Khadija Begum. But what's interesting is that before the proposal, before the engagement, and before the marriage, the Bab brings Mubarak into his household. And I think we can see this as the preparation for the declaration, which is going to happen in 2 years, because Mubarak is going to play an immense role. And Mubarak is the first member of the Bab's family in his new household, even before his wife. And Mubarak is going to help the Bab with his business, with his accounts. He is his confidant. He is going to personally welcome each of the 17 letters of the living to the house. He's going to go and get them. So Mubarak is the first member of the Bab's family. And then, of course, Khadija Begum has a dream where her ancestor Fatima kisses her on the forehead. The next day, Fatima Begum, the mother of the Bab, who shares the name with the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, kisses her on the forehead as well. And her mother is also related to Fatima Begum. And Khadija is also related to the Prophet Muhammad. You know, the Bab has 3 connections to the Prophet Muhammad, and to Khadija, his wife, and Fatima, his daughter, and the Imam Hussein, their son. He's descended from the Imam Hussein. He is related to the Imam Hussein and the Prophet Muhammad through his mother and his father and his wife. So Fatima Begum and the Bab marry. It is an extraordinary marriage. Everyone is so happy. They're so handsome. They're so beautiful. They're so amazing. They're so perfectly matched. And Khadija Begum becomes pregnant, and she loses her son in infancy. And I just want to share this, even though it's sad. I think it's important. In the Qayyum al-Asma, which we're going to look at in the next section in great detail, the Bab writes about his mother, he writes about his wife, and he writes about his son. And he comforts his wife, and he tells her that verily thy son Ahmad is with Fatima the Sublime in the sanctified paradise. The Bab leaves no descendants. He also leaves no child or son to be persecuted after he's been assassinated after his martyrdom. And he alone is the one who can comfort Khadija Begum. And this is the resting place of Ahmad, the son of the Bab, in Babi Dukhtaran in Shiraz. And this tree marks his resting place. Now, we are all so familiar with the declaration of the Bab. So what I want to do is I want to talk about something that is less well known. I want to talk about the 4th of April, 1844. And this is the first time that the Bab receives a revelation from God. Now, you're going to ask me, Violetta, how do you know it's the 4th of April? Well, I know it's the 4th of April because the Bab told me. The Bab revealed 2 tablets in which he gives a chronology of his revelation until after his declaration. And in these tablets, which if you go to the chronology, you'll be able to download, in these chronologies, he says that the first moment that he felt the divine spirit reveal through him was in the lunar calendar, which I converted to the 4th of April, 1844. The 4th of April, 1844 is it's a month and a half before the 23rd of May, 1844, which is when we commonly think, oh, this is when the Bab received his revelation. It's not. He had been feeling the revelation of God in the weeks and months and maybe even years prior to his declaration, because he always knew he was a manifestation of God. So something very interesting that happens that I want to sort of focus on is Khadija Begum's experience So one day, between the first time the Bab received the revelation on the 4th of April, 1844, and before the 23rd of May, 1844, the Bab had a moment of revelation and Khadija Begum saw him. So he arrived that day and he said, tell Fize, their other Ethiopian servant, a lady, to prepare whatever we're having for the evening meal sooner than usual. Tonight, I have a particular task to attend to. So he goes to bed early. And then at about midnight, everyone's gone to sleep. Khadija Begum realizes her husband is nowhere. So she starts looking everywhere. She looks in the house. She looks in the courtyard. She even goes to the door that leads to the street, sees that there's a lock on it. So obviously the Bab has not left the house. And then all of a sudden she turns around and she sees the light of the upper chamber of the house where the Bab is going to declare to Mullah Hussein. That's brilliantly lit. So she climbs up these very high steps, very high and very steep, very dangerous steps, all the way up. And then she sees her husband standing in the declaration chamber, facing the Qibla, the holiest place of Islam. And his hands are raised to the heavens. And he's intoning a prayer in the most melodious voice, and tears are streaming down his face. Khadija Begum sees her husband with this air of indescribable majesty and resplendence. His face is illumined as if light was coming out of it. And she's transfixed. She can't move. She's shaking. She feels like she's going to, she's shaking uncontrollably, and she thinks that she's going to faint. And she's on the verge of losing consciousness when the Bab makes a gesture with his hand, and he speaks to her and he says, go back. So she manages to free herself from this spiritual experience that's almost like a spell. She goes to bed, she doesn't sleep. In the morning, they're having breakfast in the room of the Bab's mother. And she says to him, now he gives her tea to drink in his own cup, and she drinks it. And his kindness gives her courage to say what's on her mind. And they have a very modern marriage. She's very direct with him, and he's very direct with her. He will eventually tell her, I will be martyred. So they communicate in a very modern way. And she says to the Bab, you are no longer the same person I knew in our childhood. She knows. She's the first person to believe in the Bab. Just like her ancestor, Khadija, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, was the first to believe in her husband. She was the first Muslim. Khadija Begum is the first Babi, even before Mullah Hussein. She says, we grew up together. We've been married for 2 years, living in this house. And now I see a different person before me. You have been transformed. The Bab tells her straight, it was the will of God that you should have seen me in the way you did last night, so that no shadow of doubt should ever cross your mind, and you should come to know with absolute certitude that I am that manifestation of God whose advent has been expected for 1,000 years. This light radiates from my heart and from my being. Khadija Begum would later describe to Munira Khanum, Abdul Baha's future wife, as she passed through Shiraz on her way to the Holy Land, what went through her mind when the Bab spoke those words. And Khadija Begum said, as soon as I heard him speak these words, I believed in him. I prostrated myself before him, and my heart became calm and assured. From that moment, I lived only to serve him, evanescent and self-effacing before him, no thought of self ever intruding. That experience that Khadija Begum had seeing the Bab reveal is an experience 17 men are going to have. In the 40 days between the 23rd of May, 1844 and early July, 1844, the Bab is going to reveal the Qayyum al-Asma, the commentary on the Surah of Joseph, the first official holy writings of the Babi faith. Now, the Qayyum al-Asma is a commentary on a surah of the Quran. And there are 3 distinct stages in the revelation of the Bab. The first stage is the stage of interpretation, where the Bab makes the link, like a link in a chain, with Islam. So he is the connecting point between Islam and the Baha'i faith. So what is he going to do in the first 2 years of his revelation? He's going to comment on the Quran, because he is explaining the Quran to Muslims, and he is making the link with the Baha'i faith. After he's done interpreting the surah of the fountain, the surah of Joseph, the letter Ha, the dot under the letter Ha, all of these things that are in the Quran, every single thing people ask him to explain, he explains. After this first initial 2 years, the Bab is going to have a philosophical stage of revelation. And this stage is where he reveals in Persian for the first time. So for the first time in religious history, God uses the language of Persian as a language of revelation through the Bab during his second phase of revelation, which is philosophical. And the final stage of revelation, we all know, is the legislative stage. Why? Because that's where the Bab reveals the Kitab al-Asma, the Persian Bayan, the Arabic Bayan, the laws of the Babi dispensation. So over these 40 days, 17 men come and independently find the Bab, and they experience his revelation. And one of them, the cousin of Tahireh, brings a letter from Tahireh, who declares her faith in the Bab. So the one woman disciple, the only one never to have met the Bab. And after that, the Bab goes on pilgrimage to Mecca. And so let me get to the Bab's pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. So the Bab reveals writings through the journey by sea to, he stops in various ports, and he writes letters to his wife. Let me show you a letter to his wife. It's kind of wonderful. This is, and we're so lucky to have this, really. We really are. This is the handwriting of the Bab. It's the second letter he sends to Khadija Begum from Bushir, which he says, since the time of my separation, such griefs have encircled me which are beyond description. He really confides in his wife. And this is a type of boat that the pilgrims were on. This is a man on the boat praying. You see the heavy rope for the ship. The conditions of the sea voyage are absolutely awful. The Bab arrives in Mecca and Medina. The Bab arrives in Mecca. And let me just show you some images of Mecca here. This is the Bab's pilgrimage to Mecca from the 12th to the 24th of December, 1844. One thing that's important to know, I forgot to say this, is that after all the letters of the living have declared themselves to the Bab, he sends them all on missions and sends them off with a really beautiful address. That's the address to the letters of the living. That's in the Dawnbreakers, but it's not authenticated. It's not revealed by the Bab. It was remembered by the people who were there. So it doesn't have the same sort of authority, but it's quite amazing. Before going on pilgrimage, the Bab waits to hear that Mullah Hussein has accomplished his mission. And the mission of Mullah Hussein was to find a needle in a haystack. He had to find Baha'u'llah in Tehran with no indication as to how to find him. And he does. He finds him. He gives Baha'u'llah the message of the Bab. Baha'u'llah immediately declares and then leaves his wife, Asiya Khanum, and their newborn baby, 2 months old, Abdul Baha, to go teaching for an entire summer in the district of Mazandaran. When the Bab hears of the conversion of Baha'u'llah, then he leaves Persia and he goes on pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. Mecca, this is pilgrimage to Mecca, and this is the holiest spot of Islam, the Kaaba, the Qibli. So during his pilgrimage to Mecca, the Bab arrives at the Black Stone, which is covered in cloth. And just like this man here, the Bab comes close to it, completes the rites of pilgrimage, then takes the ring on the door of the holiest place of Islam and says 3 times in a clear voice, I am that I am, whose advent you have been awaiting. And the crowd around him falls silent. The Bab declares his mission publicly to the Mirza Muhit-i Kirmani. He tells him that he is the promised one of Islam. The Bab writes to the Sheriff of Mecca, asking him to believe in him. There is no response. But he has accomplished what he set out to do. After his pilgrimage in Mecca, the Bab goes to Medina, completes the pilgrimage in Medina, and returns to Shiraz. And so this is really when the Bab's family life is going to be disrupted forever. News of the Bab's public declaration has arrived. He gets hit so violently on the face when he arrives in Shiraz that his turban falls to the ground, and he's placed under house arrest, where he will remain for 2 years. But 2 things happen during this time where the Bab is returned to Shiraz and reunited with his wife and mother. The first thing that happens is that wait, hold on. Let me just find this. Okay, the Bab. Okay. Shortly after the Bab arrives, the officials in the city arrange for him to recant what he declared in Mecca, which is that he was the promised one of Islam. So they arrange for him to recant. And the Bab arrives at the mosque, and he's not going to recant. He is invited to take the stand by the man who is leading the prayers on Friday, where the mosque is absolutely filled with hundreds of people who are just excited to hear what he's going to say. And he climbs up these exact stairs. These are the stairs to this is the one-piece marble pulpit of the Mosque of Vakil in Shiraz. And this is the pulpit from which the Bab addressed the congregation. And the Bab declares his mission publicly in Shiraz. After this, there is sort of widespread panic. And the Shah, Muhammad Shah Qajar, dispatches really his star. Dispatches his star. His star's name is his religious Shia superhero. His name is Sayyid Yahya Idarabi, but we know him as Vahid. And now Vahid is very, very famous in the Babi dispensation. He's one of the most famous disciples of the Bab, but he is not a letter of the living, because the letters of the living declared within the first 40 days of the Bab's declaration on the 23rd of May. And Vahid declared a year later. So Vahid was just, Muhammad Shah depended on him because he was such an amazing scholar. He was a very respected cleric. He was one of the most learned men in all of Persia, and he'd memorized 30,000 Islamic traditions. And he was confident that he could overcome the Bab in debate. So he had 3 interviews with the Bab. The first one, he was extremely arrogant. Then he went home and felt bad. The second one, he was just kind of stunned. And the third one, he became like dust under the Bab's feet. And he said that his words, his answers to questions which I had forgotten to ask, reacquainted me. And he became a devout believer until the end of his life in martyrdom. And when the Shah heard that Vahid had declared, he said, we're going to have to take this young Sayyid, this young descendant of Muhammad, kind of seriously now, because Vahid became a Babi. So after this, the Bab is forced to leave his mother behind, his wife behind. He leaves everyone he knows, his entire family, his uncles, and Haji Mubarak, who is now completed pilgrimage. So his name is no longer just Mubarak. And he goes to Isfahan. And the Bab is going to stay in Isfahan for about a year between 1846 and 1847. And in Isfahan is where the Bab is going to transition from the interpretive part of his ministry and his revelation to the philosophical part. He's going to reveal quite a number of philosophical writings in Isfahan and famous tablets. He becomes so popular that opposition arises and they have to hide him out of town and bring him back in the middle of the night. But eventually he receives an invitation from the Shah to meet him. And this is going to begin the last stage in the Bab's life, which is really his incarceration. The Shah wanted to meet the Bab, but it turns out that the prime minister will not let that happen, Haji Mirza Akazi. And Haji Mirza Akazi is going to send the Bab to the far end of the kingdom. He's going to leave from basically Isfahan here through Tehran, Ghazvin, the city of Tahiris, Sultaniyeh, Zanjan, Tabriz, Milan, Maku. And see that Maku is really at the tip. It's at the border between Russia and Turkey. It's really far away. They don't have the same religion as the Bab is used to. They don't speak the same language that the Bab speaks. They're not really of the same culture of the Bab. And the reason that the prime minister is sending him there is to let him and his message die in obscurity. And in fact, the opposite is going to happen. People are going to become completely devoted to the Bab. They're going to just flock to him. People are going to start to visit him. And the prison warden, first in Maku and then in Chihrik, are really going to fall in love with the Bab's character, just like everyone always does when they get even close to the Bab. And in between Maku and Chihrik, the Bab is examined in Tabriz. And this is very interesting for several reasons. One is that the portrait of the Bab, which we see when we go on pilgrimage, was painted when the Bab was on his way from Chihrik to Urumiyeh. And in Urumiyeh, which is next to the lake Urumiyeh, do I have a picture of the lake here? Yes. Look at the lake. It's a pink lake. Isn't it nice? It's a pink salt lake. You actually have one of these in Australia. You have a pink salt lake in your country. So this is the man, Malik Kazim Mirza, the Bab's host, who's just a lover of modernity. He's pictured here as one of the earliest photographs in Iran. He's looking at a watch. I mean, he loves mechanisms. He's a great person. He loves the Bab. He tests the Bab. He gives the Bab a really unruly horse because he wants to know, I wonder how good of a horseman this Bab is. I bet you the horse is going to kick him off. And the Bab totally sedates the horse by his spiritual presence, and the horse becomes the most well-behaved horse. And everybody runs to the public bath to drink the water that the Bab bathed in. And Malik Kazim Mirza has the brilliant idea of asking his painter to paint a portrait of the Bab. And we owe it to Abdul Baha, to Baha'u'llah, that the Baha'u'llah heard of this portrait of the Bab, and he commissioned 3 copies or 5 copies. Actually, if you're interested in the story of these portraits, there is a paper that was written by Adib Masumian and his father, Dr. Bijan Masumian, called The Bab in the World of Images. The Bab in the World of Images. And you can download that on the Baha'i library online. And it talks about the history of these 5 portraits of the Bab. And this is the man that we owe the portrait that we see on pilgrimage to, Malek Kazim Mirza. So the Bab's examination is really to decide what are we going to do with the Bab. And this tribunal is kind of a farce, and it's headed by the 15-year-old Nasruddin Shah, who just took over because Muhammad Shah just died. And so he's taking over, and he's 17. He doesn't really know what's going on. He's kind of listening to everybody talking. The Bab is asked absolutely pointless questions about indigestion, about conjugating the verb to say in Arabic. It's just ridiculous. And the Bab proclaims to the tribunal, once again, I am that person whose appearance ye have waited for 1,000 years. So this makes everyone angry, and they decide that they're going to, they've just listened to the Bab proclaim to this tribunal, which was sent to basically ridicule him, which they did not manage to do. He said, I am the promised one. I am the one whose name you have for 1,000 years invoked, at whose mention you have risen, whose advent you have longed to witness, and the hour of whose revelation you have prayed God to hasten. Verily I say, it is incumbent upon the peoples of both the East and the West to obey my word and to pledge allegiance to my person. These are strong words. The Bab is fearless. The Bab is supremely confident. The Bab is publicly declaring to his enemies that he is the promised one of Islam. So what happens next is that they torture the Bab here in this compound. They inflict on him the torture of the bastinado, which is the cruelest torture that exists, because it is not meant to kill. It is meant to inflict as much pain as possible by whipping the soles, the naked soles of one person's feet with a cane or a whip. In this case, a cane. And the Bab is just in extreme pain, because when they were whipping his feet, they actually whipped his face, and his face swole and was very, very affected and swollen and red. And this man is, so far as we know, the only Westerner ever to meet the Bab. His name is Dr. William Cormack, and he was Irish. And he treated the Bab, and he described him, saying that he was very mild and a delicate-looking man, rather small in stature, and very fair for a Persian, with a melodious, soft voice which struck me much. Being a Sayyid, he was dressed in the habits of that sect. It's not a sect, they're just descendants of the Prophet Muhammad, as were also his 2 companions. Of his doctrine, I heard nothing from his own lips. And most assuredly, the Muslim fanaticism does not exist in his religion. He knew very little about the Bab. After the examination in Tabriz, the Bab returns to Chihrik. And this is where, as I mentioned earlier, the Bab is going to reveal this book of 30 prayers, the 30 prayers of his 30 years of life before he passes away. But during this last 2 years of his life, between 1848 and 1850, so many things happen. The Bab reveals the Persian Bayan, the Bab reveals the Arabic Bayan, the Bab reveals the Kitab al-Asma. And in the Bayan and the Kitab al-Asma, the Bab gives us the Badi calendar and laws, the Babi laws. And the Badi calendar, this is the perfection of the Badi calendar. It's a drawing I made using assets I generated with artificial intelligence. It's 19 months of 19 days. And the Badi calendar is the most perfect division of time that exists in the world's calendars because it's 361 days, 19 months of 19 days, and there's only 4 or 5 days left over that are intercalary days. But there are 4 opening words in the Persian Bayan. Bismillah al-Amna al-Akdas. And one of the interesting things about the Badi calendar, beyond the fact that the 19 months each have a name, the 19 days of each month have the same name as the 19 days, but the days of the week also have their own names, is that the Bab divided the Baha'i year and the Baha'i 19 months into 4 groups. The first 3 months are for the word Bism, which has 3 letters, and therefore there are 3 months. And this is the months of Baha, Jalal, and Jamal, the fire of God. The next period of 4 months are for the 4 letters of the second word of the Persian Bayan, Allah. That is the air of eternity. And those are the next 4 months. They have their own element. The next element is the water of divine unity for the word Alamna, 6 months for the 6 letters of the third word. And the 4th word in the Persian Bayan is Al-Akdas, 6 letters, and the last 6 months of the calendar. And that is the sacred realm of the earth. So you have the fire, the air, the water, and the earth. That are the elements that the Badi calendar is organized under. And we don't really think of our months as divided into realms and elements, but the Bab did divide them that way. And I think that that's quite an interesting fact. So the Bab also reveals the Persian Bayan and the Arabic Bayan. And this period of the Bab's life is very, very, very painful because he hears of the martyrdom of Mullah Hussein and all of the Babis in Sheikh Tabarsi in 1849, and the massacres against Baha'is have begun, and he is going to be martyred in the middle of these massacres. So these are really very heavy moments for him. He gets to be reunited with his maternal uncle, the one who was his guardian when he was young, Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali. He writes letters to his family. But of course, Khadija Begum and his mother Fatimah Begum are kept completely in the dark about everything that happens in the Bab's life. They just don't know, and they will learn actually years later that he was martyred, maybe a year or 2 after the martyrdom happens. But you know, what we have from this period of the Bab's life that I want to, before I move on to the Bab's martyrdom, I want to kind of share something interesting, is that the Bab gave us works of art. I believe I'm not wrong in saying these are the only works of art ever created by a manifestation of God. And these are the haikals of the Bab. This is the Bab's own handwriting. This is a manuscript held by the British Museum. And the calligraphy of the Bab is not only pristine and perfect, it is also absolutely just stunning. It is a work. Calligraphy is a form of art. And this is a work of art made by a manifestation of God in the last year of his life. This haikal is not, it's very, very interesting. There is structure to the pentacle. This is the version of the Bab's art for women. This is called a daira. It's a round talisman for women. And these haikals were talismans for men. And the purpose of the talisman was for them to recognize Baha'u'llah, to keep them in the covenant and to help them recognize Baha'u'llah. So I want to tell you just a couple of things about the structure of the talisman, and then I'm going to move on to the martyrdom of the Bab. The structure of the haikal is really intricate. It's a repetition of short, rhyming, rhythmical verses intended to be chanted, not read silently. And the 5 lines that create the outline of the Heikel, of the pentacle, of the 5-pointed star are a significant verse relating to the advent of Baha'u'llah. Remember, I told you they're protective talismans so that they would recognize Baha'u'llah. And this part highlighted in green that makes the outline is a repetition of the verse, on that day, the kingdom shall be God's, the incomparable, the most magnificent. But the Heikel also has individual sections. And these sections are called Allah, 1, 2, Muhammad, 3, Ali, 4, Fatimeh, 5, Hassan, and 6, Hussein. And if you go to the chronology in part, part 11, you can read the verses that are repeated various times. I put all of the verses here. The Bab, mid-April 1850, 2 months before his martyrdom, the Bab collects all his belongings. He prepares for his death. He prepares for his martyrdom. And the person he thinks of is Baha'u'llah, whose advent he's been preparing. He gathers his holy writings, his pen case, his seals, and his rings in a box. And he gives the box to a man, the 13th letter of the living, Mullah Bakiri Tabrizi, and asks him to deliver it to another man. This other man will then deliver it to Baha'u'llah. And Baha'u'llah will receive this after the martyrdom of the Bab, which we are now going to spend some time looking at. Mirza Taqi Khan, the prime minister, orders the execution of the Bab. And the Bab arrives in Tabriz quite a number of days before his martyrdom. He arrives on the 19th of June, 1850. And he is imprisoned in the citadel of Tabriz. As he's taken through the streets on the 8th of July, Anis, this young man, teenager really, begs to be martyred with the Bab, and the Bab grants him that honor. The night passes, and the next day, on the morning of July 9th, 1850, the Bab is escorted through the streets of Tabriz. Let me see. I have the streets of Tabriz here. There you go. These are the streets of Tabriz in a courtyard. He is speaking to his amanuensis, the person who takes down his revelation, also his secretary, really. Also, his name is Sayyid Hussein. And they interrupt the conversation, the confidential conversation the Bab is having with Sayyid Hussein, but the Bab says, "Not until I have said to him all those things that I wish to say, can any earthly power silence me. Though all the world be armed against me, yet it shall be powerless to deter me from fulfilling to the last word my intention." Shortly before noon, Sam Khan, who we also have a painting of, is a commander of a regiment of 750 men. This man is an Armenian Christian, and he doesn't want to kill the Bab. He does not want to give the order to shoot him with a 750 rifle, and he begs the God. He begs the Bab to free him from committing this crime. And the Bab assures him that if his intent is pure and his heart is pure, he will be freed. So he orders his men to shoot. And at the time, these muskets, they created an immense amount of smoke. So imagine 750 rifle, and the smoke is so thick. When the smoke clears, Anis is there, but the Bab isn't. The Bab has returned to finish his conversation with his amanuensis. And after the conversation, is terminated and the Bab has said to Sayyid Hussein what he intended to say to him, the Bab turns to the executioner and says, I have finished my conversation with Sayyid Hussein. Now you may proceed to fulfill your intention. So they string up the Bab again, and he is strung up with Anis, whose head is on the Bab's breast. And they are about to be shot by another regiment because Sam Khan has left with his regiment, refused to give the order to assassinate the Bab again. And the Bab addresses the crowds with his last words from the Dawnbreakers. Had you believed in me, O wayward generation, every one of you would have followed the example of this youth who stood in rank above most of you and willingly would have sacrificed himself in my path. The day will come when you will have recognized me. That day I shall have ceased to be with you. The soldiers fired, and the Bab's body was riddled with bullets, and he was thrown to the dogs. His face was untouched miraculously. Two very, very courageous Baha'is were able to retrieve the remains of the Bab and hid them. And the Bab's remains were hidden for 50 years, 59 years, until Abdul-Baha finally placed them in the heart of Mount Carmel, in the exact spot Abdul-Baha had indicated to him 1 year before his passing, inside the vault, the underground vault that he had built. Such a strong, square, original shrine that when the Commission of Inquiry came in 1905, 4 years before the interment of the remains of the Bab on the 21st of March, 1909, they had been told it was a fortress. That's how strong and immovable the building that Abdul-Baha had built was. And then, of course, the Shoghi Effendi, the Guardian, would finish the work and build an absolute jewel of architecture with a golden dome that shines in midday splendor with its reflected gold, but that is also illumined at night, so that the Bab would never again be in darkness as he had been in Shirik and Maku. And one of the last acts of the Guardian before the completion of the building was finished was that he obtained from a Baha'i in Iran plaster, chips of plaster from the prison of the Bab in Maku. And he placed it in a silver box. And Leroy Iowitz, his secretary, didn't want the guardian of the Baha'i faith, the guardian of the cause of Baha'u'llah, to climb up a ladder. He said, I'll do it, I'll do it. And the Bab said, and Shoghi Effendi said, you forget I am a mountaineer. He climbed the ladder himself and put the silver box with the plaster from the prison of the Bab behind a golden tile, one of those fish scale tiles. Let me just really quickly see if I have a picture of that. So it's, I'll show you exactly where it is, sort of. It's in the first row of tiles, but on the other side of the building, the side that faces the garden. I think I may actually have a photograph, but not in this chronology. In this chronology, the chronology of the beloved guardian. Plaster. The silver box, there you go. So the silver box, and oh wait, hold on, this disappeared. Okay. Okay, the silver box. On the 29th of April, 1953, Shoghi Effendi climbed the scaffolding and placed behind this tile that's a little bit darker in color, a small silver box containing plaster from the prison cell of Maku. The exact tile, darker in color, is circled in the photo above. Photograph, copyright Sharon O'Toole, used with permission. And thus, the life of the Bab ends. One of the things I want to leave you with is that the prayer that Abdul-Baha said after he finally placed the remains of the Bab that were in a casket made of precious Burmese wood inside the one-piece alabaster sarcophagus created in Burma with the calligraphy, gilded calligraphy of Mishkin Kalam around all the different sides. The prayer that he said was the prayer of the dead. Because in 59 years, the Bab had never been buried. He was martyred on the 9th of July, 1850, and he was buried on the 21st of March, 1909. I want to thank you all for having invited me today. I enjoyed myself very much, and it was an honor to share these stories of the Bab with you. And if you have, they don't have to be questions necessarily. They can be comments, they can be observations, they can be questions. Yeah, I'm free.
Thank you, Violetta. Very much appreciated that, and a wonderful way to learn about the Bab. We've learned about him through his writings, which can touch the heart, and this is another way to, which brings him to life. So we've got...
That's such a kind compliment. Thank you. Oh, I want to tell you I appreciate that you said that. Thank you.
Oh, well, it's just
I
what
think
I
we
was
have a question
thinking.
by Young.
We do. Young.
Hello, how are you, Violetta?
Good, how are you, Young?
Yeah, it's nice to meet you for the first time. I think I need to go to the family tree to see if we really related as relative. So probably through my grand.
You know what? I'm gonna put my email in the chat, and then you can email me.
Yeah, so see if you can join a unity sort of notion. Unity. You want to be unity with me?
Unity?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
But we long way down with different oceans.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's unite across the Indian Ocean. I've put my email in the chat. It's if those of you are listening and you need to email me a question, my email is violettaz@gmail.com. So, Jung.
Yeah, thank you. Just let you know, I'm from a Catholic background. So my question is, maybe this is something that you haven't talked to us, or the history or research haven't come across so far. If any of your faith manifestation leader have done miracle, because in the Catholic Church, even a little boy did not do any writing or anything, but 16 years old or something. But if he could do miracle, that can be verified by the doctors in a hospital, and died of a Catholic faith, like in Jesus or Mary, then he can be canonized or blessed as saint and angel.
Yes.
So
yes, absolutely.
in the Catholic
absolutely.
Church, we do require certain things to to pronounce that person as an angel, or like Saint Therese, the roses, all the different saints and angels. But I don't know about the other religion.
Yeah.
Like after
one
they
thing
done
I forgot to...
miracle, after they done miracle, then they be qualified as a divine being.
Yeah, okay, so I can answer partly. One of the things I forgot to say is that the only two manifestations of gods to have been assassinated were the Bab, who was martyred and shot, and Jesus Christ, who was crucified. And they were about the same age. The Bab was 31 and Jesus Christ was 33. And if you go to the chronology, in the last part of the chronology, I have a long section on Jesus Christ and the Bab and the parallels that Shoghi Effendi traces between them. I have heard many different stories of miracles happening in the Baha'i faith. Some of them are sort of healing, like, for example, Abdul Baha basically restored the sight of Haji Mirza Haidar Ali, who had been imprisoned and his eyesight was going. And he told him, he gave him some advice, and then his eyesight came back. When Baha'u'llah was in the most great prison, a man died. And he died, like his heart stopped. And the panicked believers went to see Baha'u'llah, and Baha'u'llah said, just chant the tablet, the long healing prayer for them. And the man came back to life. So there are stories like this in the faith, and this is a story that was, I can look it up if you want, but they are, in a sense, there's a lot of talk about alchemy too in the holy writings of the Baha'i faith. And alchemy is this thing that people have been looking for millennia, a way to transmute copper into gold or some other metal into gold. And what the Baha'i faith's attitude is to miracles is that the greatest miracle of any manifestation of God is the transformation of a human heart and the transformation of a person. And that's the real alchemy. And so even though there are some stories of miracles in the faith, and I guarantee you, if you do a Google search, Baha'i miracle stories, you're going to find some, the true miracle and the true proof of the truth of the manifestation of Baha'u'llah and his writings and the Babs and Abdul Baha's is the effect that the covenant and being in the covenant and being touched by the covenant has on your soul, and how it can transmute copper into gold, spiritually speaking. So I'm sorry, it's kind of an answer, non-answer, but that's all I can offer. Mark?
Violetta, wonderful to see you again, and wanted to say how much I enjoyed the presentation. Every time I listen to you, I'm in awe of the fact that you really go very deep into the subject matter and uncover things that no matter how long and how many hours anyone study the subject matter, they're going to be amazed with what you share. I have a question which is a little bit of a tricky one for you, Violetta.
Okay, wow. Thank you for prefacing that.
You're going to have to put your thinking caps on. It's to do with the square in Tabriz where the Bab was martyred and shot. Now, we know from reading Shoghi Effendi's masterpiece, God Passes By, where he says that there were 3 rows of 250 riflemen. There were 750. There are, so as a Baha'i myself, I implicitly believe that because Shoghi Effendi has said so, but there are now a growing number of people who are looking at the photographs of the square saying that it was not possible, that the space was too small to have 750 and 10,000 people that people are talking about, there wasn't enough room. I don't know, do you have any commentary around that? I'm sorry if you find this question to be delicate.
I do. I'm gonna just backpedal a little bit to explain what I'm gonna say. Is if you go to let me just, I'm gonna put this in the chat for everyone. Actually, I just gave a talk on God Passes By, and okay, hold on, let me just get it here. And in that talk on God Passes By, I explain in very, very great detail how the Guardian wrote God Passes By. And the way he wrote God Passes By is that what happened? Hold on, storytelling. He read everything that he could find on history, and he had to often make the choice between 2 contradicting stories, and he made a choice. Now, one of the things that the Guardian says in God Passes By, for example, or in that is said in the Nabil's narrative is that the Bab declared to Mullah Hussein over the course of a single night. Modern Baha'i historians now believe this is not accurate based on statements by Mullah Hussein, which have been verified by several people, that he actually went to the Bab's house 3 nights in a row, basically pestered the Bab, asked him a lot of questions, and he felt bad about it. He said, I really feel bad that I really, I was really difficult, When you compare him to Qudus is the last letter of the living. Qudus never even asked a question. He was not educated. And Mullah Hussein was deeply educated, deeply intelligent. He was the star student of Sayyid Kazim. Qudus was basically a teenager, like a barefoot teenager without a penny, not educated. He told Mullah Hussein to get out of the way and say, why are you trying to hide him? I can see it's him by his gait. Qudus was the one that the Bab chose to accompany him on pilgrimage. Mullah Hussein, he sent to Tehran to, I'm not saying there's better or worse, but Qudus is the 18th letter of the living, the last letter of the living, but the Guardian says he's the first in rank. So we now know from Dr. Abbas Amanat and many other Baha'i historians, which I can't even name drop them because I can't remember. A lot of Baha'i historians now believe that actually the declaration took place over 3 days, but that the story in Nabil of the single night is just compounded. All of the different things in all these 3 different nights that are compounded into a single night. Another thing that we always thought was that the Bab and Mullah Hussein met for the first time on the 23rd of May, 1844. We know that for a fact to no longer be true. We know that the Bab and Mullah Hussein were in the same room, and the Bab cried when Mullah Hussein recited this beautiful prayer. So what I'm saying right now, like this book of 30 prayers that I'm kind of obsessed, like low-key obsessed with, that the Nader Saidi found in the archives of the Baha'i World Center, and the prayer that he said for Haji Mubarak, like everything we know about Haji Mubarak, that's new. The book of 30 prayers is just a few years old. Dr. Abbas Amanat, who I'm also low-key obsessed with, is from 2005. That's when he wrote his dissertation. So yeah, that is absolutely, people were not miniature back then, right? So if you go to the square and you think, oh, they couldn't fit, it's one of 2 things. Either they built up the square and reduced the surface area, or maybe there were 10 rows, maybe there were 7 rows, maybe, they were staggered. Maybe there was a staircase and they were staggered on a staircase, so what's going to happen is this. A historian other than me, because I can't read Persian, and I can't read 19th century Persian, even less since I can't read Persian. So some historian is going to eventually be in Iran, and they're going to go and they're going to find archives that are, I guarantee you there are archives about the martyrdom of the Bab stuck in some government library, and one day we're going to have answers, because when Baha'u'llah was imprisoned in the Siachal, I'm going to show you this because this is super cool. There is an article that Mujan Momin unearthed. Oh my God, you guys are going to love this. This is such a great story. This was when I wrote to Dr. Momin about this little footnote that he put in one of his essays. I said, oh, Dr. Momin, you mentioned something about, there's an article that was written about Baha'u'llah when he went to Siyat Shah. Just wondering, is this real? Is this really an article? Because I've never heard of this. This is really interesting. And he emailed it to me. Oh, I misspelled article. This is the very first article ever written about Baha'u'llah. This is a mention of Baha'u'llah being brought into the Siyat Shal, and the second is an image of him saying he's been imprisoned for life. And I just could not resist. This is a government newsletter, and this is like a 2-headed lion, I think, that's holding a sword. I just thought that was so hilarious. I had to put this in there. But yeah, so this is the Baha'u'llah's arrest, and this is the article, the article, and oh, I know what I'm going to do. In the chat, and you're welcome to put this in the description of the video. This is the first article about Baha'u'llah, and then I'm going to give you the article. So I'm going to stop sharing, sorry. And then I'm going to give you the section of the chronology where I write about God passes by, so you can see how he wrote it. And yeah, you know, Mark, to answer your question, long story short, I do think that we're going to find more information about this. And I think that's a beautiful point that you raise. And one of the exciting things about being alive today is that there's always new research happening. God passes by story in the Guardian chronology. And then I'll give you the...
I hope your discussion on your presentation on God passes by was recorded, Violetta.
Yes, it is. I put the link in the... Oh, yes. I'm sorry. It is recorded. Yeah, let me send you that instead. Yeah, it was just last week, so it's going to be easy to find. Are there any comments or questions?
Michael?
No, I have a question. Thank you.
Oh, 1 second, Jung. I think Michael had his hand up.
Yeah, look, just to say again, thank you very much for that beautiful presentation, Violetta. I could be here asking you questions for a good few hours, so I don't know where to start.
You have my email. You have my email, so you can email me anything you want.
Thank you. One of the interesting observations and just your clarification is this extraordinary image of the immense light that emanates from these people when they are revealing. And I think that was described in the Sia Chal, was it, for Baha'u'llah? That there was this enormous light associated with that process. I don't know if it happened to Christ. In Moses, of course, had the burning bush, which I think we have been told was not a fire, but was a huge light that did not consume the bush. I'm not sure if that's true or
Did you know it's the voice of Baha'u'llah in the bush, right?
Right.
It was Baha'u'llah talking to Moses in the burning bush. It was the voice of Baha'u'llah to Moses.
Right. So in that process, there's just a huge light. What's your reflection on this sort of part of the process that is witnessed with all the prophets?
Oh, you mean this light emanating from the Bab when he was revealing and Khadija Begum saw him? You know,
and Baha'u'llah, I think in the Sia Chal, was that right?
Yes, absolutely. So you know, every religion has their own way of representing the Holy Spirit. The Zoroastrians have a fire, the Catholics have a dove, the Muslims have the angel Gabriel, and the Baha'is have the Maiden of Heaven. She's the one who brings the message. Now, the only sort of clue that I can offer, and we can totally discuss this together, is that it can only be light, because light is the absence of darkness, and a new manifestation coming to earth, receiving the revelation from God, is bringing light to banish the darkness of humanity and how lost humanity has become and how they've corrupted the previous message. So in a sense, it can only be light. But I don't know, you know, this is just, I'm just thinking.
But not everyone sees it.
No, correct. But those who were with these people certainly saw it.
Yeah.
Those who were with them at the time saw it.
Yeah. I think one thing I didn't share about Khadija Begum is that she was really confused because there was only one source of light in the room, and she thought that there were 1,000 lights.
Yeah. So there was physical light, like what she was seeing was an enormously powerful physical light. And yes, it was figuratively, it was the light of truth and so on, and I understand that. But yeah, an extraordinary process that seems to accompany revelation in the prophets.
Yeah. I mean, that would be an interesting story to like try to gather a compilation of all of the pilgrim's notes of
The
people
scriptures,
witnessing
yes.
Baha'u'llah in
Yeah.
Revelation, and Babi's witnessing the
Yeah.
the Bab in Revelation, and also maybe even a compilation on light in the writings, you know, because we exist because there's a sun that we can't even look at, otherwise we'll go blind, you know. So anyway, beautiful question. I think I'll be thinking about your question for a while.
Thank you, Michael. I think we're over time, but I think we have time for Pina.
Oh, we have
New.
we have time for Pina and you, definitely.
Good. Yeah.
Pina?
Did you unmute?
Trying to unmute.
There you go. There's your nice voice.
Yes, thank you so much. The way you told the story is flowing so beautifully, and it's so clear. It's so clear, and it's just so beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so. We can't thank you enough, really, Violetta. And your name itself, there is a song. Hear my song, Violetta. Hear my song, Beneath the Moon. Come with me in my gondola. That one I remember. It's a very old song. Very old song, but beautiful song. But anyway,
I love
you know,
it. I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna write it down and look it up.
Very old song. I don't know whether it's still around. So anyway, really everything is so beautiful. Even just watching you itself with the background of your screen.
Africa.
That's color. Oh my. Everything is
just
so
a disclaimer, the local artist who painted this is wrong. We don't have either these parrots or these toucans here. This kind of invention. This is not ecologically accurate.
Oh, it's good to have imagination.
Yes. Okay, so talking about the Bab, when I saw his portrait in the Holy Land, you know, I just reminded me of Virgin Mary. Virgin Mary is so beautiful with oblong face and very, it looks really very gentle and beautiful. And I was telling to the friends how my really blessing of even the portrait of the Bab, seeing that is so beautiful. I just say beautiful.
Oh, wow.
I won't say handsome. It's more beautiful than handsome.
Yeah.
So anyway, the miracle, talking about the miracle, the story of his martyrdom itself. Just imagine 750 rifles. And what happened to that? Only the rope that tied them shattered. That's all.
Yeah.
And the boy, the youth,
there's a miracle,
standing unhurt. How can you explain that?
That's a miracle.
It's a miracle.
Yeah.
And the Bab was missing. He went back to the place where he was.
Yeah.
And truly, he said, no one can stop me until I finish what I want to do.
Exactly.
So you say he got a bipolar. He can appear in two places at the same time. Bipolar. So he's got a medical condition, isn't it? It's not a miracle.
Oh, it is a miracle.
Medical condition,
that is a medical condition, and I don't believe that Baha'u'llah talked to Moses in a bushfire, because if he said so, he will say, I am Baha'u'llah, I'm talking to Moses. He will introduce himself. He's not going to say, I am God. That's what I think, because the Hollywood movie portrayed a different story of what you said. And the way that you talk about the Bab, it looked like you got his diary, because so many details that can only list is the diary of a person who owned it. So who got a diary? The authority at that time hold the diary, or the follower hold the diary of the martyr?
Right.
That's the question.
Can we put that question on hold? Thank you. It's a good one. Thank you. You're next.
Yes.
Unmute. You had to unmute. Neo?
She's doing it. She's unmuting. Hi, New.
Hi. Actually, I don't have question, but just some feedback for today's topic on this. What you just shared, that actually before I learn the Bob's history in Chinese, but today I have it's a introduction for Bob's life in English, and also I think there's some images and also some language, Persian language, and I think it will be let me have a more more detail, more clear about life of Bob, and also I think it's let me have a more closer between Bob's life. Maybe I think because there's some image and also some Persian language, so yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Niu. I'm so happy that it was helpful.
Niu is
yes, Siva.
We call her Demi. She's a volunteer at the Baha'i Temple. Okay, thank you. And
thank you.
I just put a quote in the chat because
okay.
Michael was asking the question about the light on the manifestations. It says that in John 8:12, Jesus applies the title to himself while debating with the Jews and states, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." I think I mean, we may not have the real accounts of what happened. Every manifestations of God, a reflection of the power and majesty of God, will be showing this light in, and those who perceive will perceive it. So I don't have any doubt that Jesus would have had that as well. And Violetta has put a quote. Okay, Baha'u'llah conversed with Moses in the burning bush. So,
Eva, I just want to congratulate you on getting such an amazing speaker for the series tonight. So,
yeah, very impressive.
You're funny.
Has anyone just one quick comment? Thanks, Siva. About a most beautiful song by two Indian children, which for the martyrdom of the Barb, any holy days feast you have, is the most moving thing. And it is the words, "Had you believed in me?" And it's that whole sentence. It is utterly gorgeous. A brother and sister, they're about 10 and 12. Wow. If you can find that, it does that
I'll look for it.
so beautifully. And it's a wonderful holy days thing for the martyrdom of the Barb. Really quite extraordinary. Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much. It was wonderful.
Siva, will you be able to somehow save all the chat information before the meeting ends? Does it all get lost at the end?
Yes, it whoever's computer that the Zoom gets downloaded to will get a text with the chat.
Yes, I will get it.
Okay, good. Thank you, Siva.
It won't be lost.
All right. Look, I think this could go forever.
Yeah, it could.
Personally, Fortunately, we have a link to the utterance site, which it can go forever at our leisure.
Good.
And I also just want to
also email me at my email address if you want me to put you on my email list. I send out an email on Sunday with the latest version of the Guardian chronology, and when I publish new chronologies and do new talks, I also email people. So if you want to be on my email list, just send me a little email.
Wonderful.
Thank you. And there are other people here who has not spoken. If they want to say anything.
Yeah. Does anybody want to say anything else?
1944, Sepi, Panja, Genus, Priyanka, Reshmi, anyone? If not, my brother Jiva is there, but he doesn't normally. If not, we can conclude, and thank you very much. And
Thank you, Violet. It was really nice.
Thank you so much.
I was
Lot of new
very
information.
happy
you.
to be with you
Thank you,
today. I love
everybody.
you
It
guys.
was wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks,
Thank
Violetta.
you.
And thank you for
Thank-
introducing the scholarship into the presentation as well as the.
Oh, it's my
the
favorite
colour.
thing in the whole world to do. So I just am very happy. Thank you for
Wonderful.
giving me this
Thank
chance.
you, Violetta.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Violetta.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
Violetta.
sweetie. Bye,
Bye-bye.
Jan.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
everybody.
Thank you very much
Bye,
for
Michael.
sharing.
Bye, Colin.
Thank you.
Bye, Siva.
Thank you. Thank
Bye,
you.
Pina. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay.